We're pulling out this bad boy today. Hello and welcome back to the Little Craft House. Today I thought we could get crafty by pulling out the Cricut machine. So I had a mirror which I thought we could personalize and decorate and just make it into something a little bit fun. So I myself am a beginner still. I haven't been using the Cricut for very long. I'm still learning as I go, but I thought I'd bring you along with me. Maybe we can learn a thing or two together and hopefully we come out with a beautiful project at the end. The first thing I'm going to do is choose some vinyl. Well, at least get a little bit of inspiration from my vinyl. I'm not exactly sure yet exactly what I'm going to put on the mirror. I'm thinking maybe a quote. So I just wanted to have a look and see what vinyls I do have and just see what colour options are there first. And then once I look at the quotes, I'll be able to sort of match something up and yeah, hopefully find something that I'm happy with. So if you're wondering about the container that I'm storing all my papers in, it's actually for scrapbooking papers. So it's the perfect size for the 30 by 30 sheets, which are what I've had in a lot of the sampler or mixed packs, specifically from the TeckWrap brand. So yeah, these containers come in really handy to hold and store them in. I have another container as well, which I keep all my little offcut pieces and open rolls that no longer want to stay wound together nicely. Okay, I've got a couple of colour ideas in mind, so now I'm going to jump on over to the computer, and I do apologise for the really bad lighting. We've got a really yellowish sort of light above this, so yeah, I do apologise. On the computer here, I am using the design space. I recently upgraded to have the full access. If you don't have full access though, you don't have the subscription for it, there are other options for being able to get your images. So you can import the images from another program, which Creative Fabrica is one that I particularly like. I do have an affiliate link to that one in my description box. So if you do want to check that out, they've got some great images. Alternatively, if it is something simple, you'd just be able to design it in that section there for free, and that's nice and easy. So next step is to measure up our mirror and work out the size that we want our decal to be. Now, before we go any further, I'm just going to freeze it here and say that I measured up, but I forgot to actually adjust the sizing. So I don't actually realize until later on, and I do say quite a bad word when I realize, so I will make sure I edit that out. But yeah, measure and adjust the sizing. I didn't adjust the sizing. I just came straight over and went to changing these settings here. So after adjusting the sizing, I should have come over to change this, making sure it is basic cut, and then just changing it to black, which will just make sure that it all cuts nicely out when it's sent over to the machine. So lucky for me, that original sizing isn't much different to what I need. Once you've adjusted the sizing and the cut, going to hit on that attach button, and the attach just makes sure that it stays all nicely laid out once it hits into that next area of the software. So I'm going to save the project now. Once I've finished the project, I will publish it in underneath my profile, and I'll attach the link in the description box so that you're able to check that out if you want to and use my settings. Right, next up, I'm going to tell it that it's using, or that I'm using a mat, and it's going to just bring it up here so that I know how much space I need of my vinyl. I'm going to tell it to continue, and it's going to connect over to the machine. Okay, the last step before we cut is just to let the machine know what type of vinyl we're using. So we're using a permanent vinyl. This one here is pretty much my go-to setting. It works for most of the vinyls that I use, but if you're not sure, there is a cutting guide in the Cricut software, and other types of vinyl like TeckWrap have their own conversion charts as well, so you can refer to those. So we're finally at the machine, and we now need to press those blinking arrows, and they're just going to pull the mat through, and the machine is just going to check to make sure that everything is okay. It's going to check the depth of the vinyl and get itself ready for cutting. Once it's ready, the start button will start flashing, and we can now press that and it will start cutting. So normally I would leave the sound on because I quite like listening to all the little beeps and whirring and whizzing noises and everything that it makes. It's quite a good sound to listen to, but today my family had the television on quite loud, and so that was just, yeah, you didn't want to hear that. I also don't want to get pinged for any copyright, because I have heard of people getting in trouble for stealing copyright when they've got like a movie or a television show playing in the background and their videos pick up that sound. So yeah, I'm just trying to avoid that, so I've just knocked that sound off completely. So it didn't take too long for this image to be cut out, mainly because it's quite a simple quote, doesn't have too much detail. When I've cut out things that have a lot of intricate detail, that's when it takes longer. Whereas, yeah, this one's quite large. It's not small and intricate, so yeah, it's not too long to cut it out. Then once it's finished doing its thing, it just starts flashing that light again. So just press that button and it will eject my mat out, and then I can peel my vinyl off. So it's a little tricky to see, but if I catch it in the right light, you can see what it's cut out there. And I also decided to cut out some little pink flowers as well. So I haven't really attempted much layering with my Cricut yet with the vinyl, so I thought to add a bit extra colour, rather than doing those like multicoloured words, how it was in the beginning, I was just doing that single colour with the words, and then I'm just going to add some little pink flowers as well. So I just did that whole process again, setting up some flower images, and then sent it to the machine for that to cut out. So now I need to remove the excess vinyl, which will just leave us with the quote ready to transfer. So I'm just going to trim down my vinyl so that I'm not going to waste anything too much, because wastage is one of the things that I really dislike about using vinyl and my Cricut. I just can't get over the amount of wastage, so I try and save as much as possible, and I try and reuse or cut things in those extra gaps, but yeah, so I just prefer to cut it down as a nice little square around the edge there, and then I'm going to be able to weed off the excess. Now, I'm going to admit, this wasn't as easy as what it would normally be for me. Because I'm not working in my usual room, I'm working down at the dining room table, it was a little bit hard for me to weed this with the lighting. So normally I put in an additional light. That light makes the film flicker, so I had to turn that off. So it's actually really tricky for me to see where those cut lines are. I also am on a bit of a strange angle because of the camera. So yeah, this just wasn't as easy as what it would normally be, and it's not because of the vinyl or because of the cut, but because of me. So yeah, I did struggle a little bit, but yeah, that's mainly my own fault. I just wanted to chat a little bit about the types of vinyl as well. So not all vinyls are created equally, and some vinyls are much easier to weed and use than other vinyls. I quite like the TeckWrap vinyl, and I don't mind the Cricut vinyl either. Some colours can be a little trickier than others in both of those brands. This one here, I'm not 100% sure, but I think that it is TeckWrap because it was in just one of those smaller squares in my crate. Now, here I'm just trimming the excess. I don't want it to fold over and stick to itself. So when I'm doing bigger projects, I will just trim it down as I'm going, just to make it a bit easier for myself. Some of these little bits here got a little bit stuck as well, so I just have to put a little bit of pressure on just to help remove it. I also find sometimes changing the angle at what I'm working will also help. So sometimes I might struggle going in one direction, but when I flip it around and work from a different angle, it actually just peels off really easy. Okay, so I'm now just going to go along and weed out each of the internals from each of the letters. I've just popped it into faster speed just so that You can see me doing it, but just it's a little bit quicker doing it this way. Then once I'm happy with how it's all done, it's time to cut some transfer tape. So again, I'm just going to cut some out. I'm going to cut it to be just slightly bigger than this square that I have my quote on. So the good thing about the transfer tape, it's got grid lines so I can cut it nice and straight. If you've watched my tutorials before, you know that straightness doesn't really, it's not one of my things. Near enough's good enough for me most of the time, but yeah, just with the transfer tape it does make it a little bit easier if it's straight. You'll see in a minute though that it kind of doesn't matter for me with this one anyway. So just going to trim it down that little bit more. I'm just going to chuck that to the side. Right, so I'm going to now put the transfer tape over the top of this decal, and then that's what's going to transfer it from that page that it's on onto the mirror that we're doing. So if I was really wanting it to keep it nice and straight, it would help to have like a gridded mat underneath of me, and that way I could line the grid marks up and keep it all nice and straight. But I'm just going to whack it on like this, and because I'm actually leaning on a piece of it's like a white piece of paper, because my desk was dark and this filming's dark anyway. So anyway, I was leaning on some paper. I was really worried that my transfer tape was going to stick to that paper and not pull off properly, but it did pull off okay, so we don't have to worry too much there. But I was worried about that. So now I've transferred it over. I can now pull off, oops, there's my face. All right, I'm actually just making sure that it fits. And about now is when I realised that I hadn't changed the sizing. I was very confused of why it was going right to the edges. When I measured it, I made sure that it came in more. And I wasn't 100% sure to start with if I had done the height, changed the height, not the width. But then obviously when I went back and looked at the filming, I realised that I didn't change it at all. So anyway, this is me being super confused on why it was right to the edge. But anyway, back to peeling off the transfer tape. So, or rather peeling off the backing. So I'm going to peel the backing off. We're just going to leave that image on my tape. And I did go and clean my mirror too, because it had all fingerprints all over it. So I made sure it was nice and clean, and then I'm just going to try not to touch it at all with my hands so that our image goes on nicely without fingerprints stuck underneath. I was also a little thrown because the edges of the mirror go down slightly. It's on a slight angle, and because this isn't, or it's rather it's right to the edges, so I didn't transfer this over as well as what I should have. I was really concentrating on making sure that it was actually going to fit on the mirror, and I ended up bubbling some of my letters. You'll see it in a minute. It's terrible. You can see it on the O already. Big mistake there. I really mucked up the transferring of this one. So today was supposed to be like a tutorial, but it's actually more just a tutorial of all the mistakes I made along the way. So I'm going to do another tutorial another day, which is going to be a proper tutorial without all my little mistakes that I make. So anyway, I'm going to peel this off. Oh, and I didn't mention before, the backing page that I was just trying to see if I could lift that bit of O, but I couldn't, so I'll come back and fix that afterwards. The backing paper from this transfer tape I did put to the side. I mentioned before about how much I hate wastage of vinyl and these sorts of projects. So what I'll do is I'm going to put this transfer tape back on that page, and next time I'm transferring something just little, I'll be able to use the tape so that way I'm reusing it and it's not getting wasted, because I really just would hate to scrunch that up and throw it away. Obviously it'll lose a little bit of its stick, but I can use it probably 1 or 2 more times and it'll be fine. Right, there we go. I have scraped out some of those bubbles and it's looking pretty good. But now I'm going to add on my little pink flowers just to give it a bit of colour, just to give it that little pop. And obviously when I planned this, I thought I was going to have more rooms on the side. So I'm going to have to be really careful about how I place these flowers on, making sure that there is enough room for them. Now, it would have been good if I'd actually done a few more of those smaller flowers, but the internals of the bigger flower are also little flowers, so I'm going to be able to use those internals. And I decided that I'm not going to use the transfer paper. I am just going to use my weeding tools, and if I've got some tweezers, I would use the tweezers just to move them over and put them on. It's just going to be a little bit easier than the transfer paper step because they're small enough to be able to do this. So once I've got these flowers on and in the position that I want it to be, I'll give the mirror another quick clean off just to get all those fingerprints off, and I need to find somewhere in my craft room for it. So I'm thinking it'll look really nice against one of my plants because having that mirror, I think that'll look really good. As I mentioned before, I'm going to do another similar project to this with less mistakes. I've already half planned what I'll be doing. So yeah, keep your eyes out in future for my other Cricut and vinyl tutorials, because it was pretty fun to do this, even though I did make a few mistakes along the way, and I'm sure my weeding abilities drove many of you absolutely crazy, so I do apologise for that. As I mentioned in the beginning, I am still new to Cricut and vinyl and these sorts of projects. So if you do have any tips or advice for me, please feel free to leave that in the comments or link me to your own YouTube video, because I'm really enjoying watching other people's tutorials as well at the moment. Also, if you would like to see me tackle a particular project, leave that suggestion for me as well. As I mentioned before, I do have a few projects in mind and I've got a few earring ones planned out for the near future. Otherwise, if you've got something different you'd like me to try, please let me know. In the meantime, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today on my little journey. It's been lots of fun. There's been a few mistakes, but it's been fun. So thanks for joining me, and I will be back next week with another tutorial. So thanks again, and I will see you then. Bye!